pledge allegiance to the flag
of the
of the United States of America
and
and
to
to
the
the republic for which it stands, one nation,
under
under
God,
God, indivisible, with liberty
and
and
justice
for all.
for all.
Roll call.
Mr. Carson,
Here.
Dr. Fike. Here. Mrs. Love. Mr. Polakowski,
Here.
Mrs. Raymond,
Here.
Mrs. Rhodes,
Here.
Mrs. Heather Smith,
Here.
Mrs. Christy Smith,
Here.
Mrs. Williams.
Here. I'm sorry, I'm having technical difficulties at the moment. I just wanted to announce that we were in executive session for personnel and legal matters. And Mrs. Love did contact me to say that she would not be present this evening. Do we have any citizens' comments?
Yes, we do. Do we have a Juliana Orr? Juliana, go ahead, honey.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. My name is Juliana Orr. I live on 211 Hunter Drive in Scottsdale, and I'm a 2019 graduate from Southmoreland. So I first would like to address not just the board, but also the administration, the teachers, personnel, and any other contributors for their dedication and tireless work for doing all in their power during all of this. I've noticed that it's become a trend to just criticize and degrade all of the individuals in this Zoom call. So I just wanted to give my sincere thanks to all of you, because I know being in this position entails some of the most unrewarding and thankless work throughout these times. So I hope you all know that there are people who appreciate you, even if it's unheard. Secondly, there's a lot I wish I could unpack in my comment, but I will just limit it to two important things. Contrary to what it seems, there truly are so many people who have different opinions than those we hear the most. And I know for a fact that most choose not to speak up in fear of being ridiculed by the community. So I'll be that guinea pig tonight. No one should be expecting for all of the answers for what we're dealing with to be handed out on a silver platter from the board and the administration, because the district can't control that our buildings aren't large enough to socially distance all students, or that we don't have enough staff to break up classrooms to go 5 days, or that some students are failing because they aren't logging into their classes and actively contributing. No matter what the school does, someone will always find something to complain about. And at the end of the day, just simply deciding to return back to normal as if this virus still doesn't exist would just create more problems in the long run. So controversial or not, I think it's time to stop taking the easy way out and hammering the board and the administration and just be more reasonable. I know it's hard to be level-headed as we're approaching a year of dealing with this pandemic, and everyone wants to go back to what we once knew, including the traditional 5 days a week. But I think it's important to be patient and just realize that this virus still exists, whether we want to think it does or not. But most importantly, and why I primarily am speaking today, is that I would like to specifically point out how Catherine Fike has made some pretty wild and dangerous claims in these meetings, such as there's minimal research proving the efficacy of social distancing, has paralleled remote education to discrimination and child abuse, among many other things, including blatantly discounting how many lives have been affected and taken by this virus. You know, we can talk about research. We can rip apart Governor Wolf or the mayor of Chicago, because we have the right to discuss all of these things as people, but doing it via the school board is just not right. And if you don't feel that's the case, then I would recommend you to head into policy analysis or maybe public relations of some sorts, because spewing your political views and biases while everyone is trying to find solutions for our local school system is just not the way to do it. I'm not here tonight to slander this board member, but instead to just suggest that politics and personal biases are left out of the discourse and decisions that are made, because it honestly does nothing but irritate people and make for some annoying Facebook arguments, which isn't the point of these meetings. I know that everything involving COVID has become so politicized and has just exacerbated the divide between people, but there's a major problem when these ideologies become central to how you, as a Southmoreland School District board member, present yourself as a representation of the community. So our focus should be on our community and how to navigate these circumstances through the resources that we have available, that we have access to. Because what other districts, towns, cities, or states are doing, truthfully, doesn't mean anything. What matters is how we can collaborate and unify to find viable solutions, and treating these meetings as if they're Senate hearings or a high school debate championship does literally nothing for the common good of the community, and that's including the students. So if there's anything you take from this, just please let it be that we all know that being in a pandemic is hard, and having to come on here and make tough decisions because of it is even harder. But constantly sitting here and fueling arguments because you cannot separate yourself from your personal politics just makes it all the much more difficult for everybody. So yeah, that's it. Thank you for your time. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you. Do we have any others, Mrs. Tarson?
Yes, Stephanie Geyer.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Geyer. I live at 565 Bessemer in Mount Pleasant, which is in East Huntington Township. I would like to thank the admin for their presentation at the last meeting and for also what they plan to present tonight. It's mind-boggling to me to figure out why it took until February to come up with a plan that should have been developed in the summer when students began the hybrid model. It was also concerning to hear the downplay of the seriousness of comparisons of students failing to last year's numbers. Percentages don't lie, and these numbers are shocking. When your failure rates have doubled in 3 of your buildings, there's a serious problem that needs addressed. And attributing it to the students, it being their fault that they're not logging in when they would likely be more successful had they been in the building, is not solving the solution by attributing it to the students. We have continuously been told that returning to full in-person instruction is not an option at this time for our district, that we cannot compare to other districts, that if we do so, sports and extracurriculars would be canceled. As you know, PDE says school districts must attest to complying to 2 documents to offer any in-person instruction. The first is a masking order, which Southmoreland students are already complying with in the hybrid model. The second is the recommendations for pre-K to 12 schools following identification of a case of COVID. This document outlines how schools respond to COVID cases depending on the level of community transmission. Although Westmoreland has fallen into the moderate level, Fayette has not, so we have to use the county with the higher transmission rate. Fine, substantial. However, I'm sure we can safely assume that the few Southmoreland, Fayette County zip codes are likely not the locations contributing to Fayette County's numbers. With a substantial recommendation, there is a note listed. The DOH and PDE recommend a full remote learning model for all students with substantial level of community transmission. Schools that choose to pursue in-person instruction should follow the recommendations here. Maybe my own Southmoreland education is failing me and I am misinterpreting the meaning of the word recommend, but to me, recommend does not mean mandate. The DOH and PDE are not mandating that schools choose a hybrid model. There is an additional FAQ page for this document. Question 1, are the recommendations for schools in determining instructional models mandatory? No. Also on this page, are students engaged in in-person learning required to maintain 6 feet of physical distancing at all times? The answer reads that while schools should have protocols for distancing desks and seating that allow for at least 6 feet of separation among students and staff to the maximum extent feasible. Another document also says to the maximum extent when possible. It doesn't say or else the school gets shut down. This attestation only requires you to agree to comply with masking and the recommendations for cleaning and closing schools upon identified cases. The suspension of sports and extracurriculars falls only upon those schools who do not submit an attestation, not schools who reinstate full-time in-person learning. This district has already signed the attestation, so that is not the thing that's holding us back from in-person learning. I continue to see the solicitor of this board, who claims to only be present to offer an unbiased interpretation of the laws, use his position to sway the school board to keep our children at home. As someone who doesn't have children or grandchildren in the district struggling with virtual learning, his opinion should stay unbiased and relevant to the facts. He highlights and underlines portions of these documents that support his own opinion on how Southmoreland should be educating its students. This bias is further evidenced in a memo dated January 19 from Mr. Patonick to the board and admin. It should not be in Mr. Patonick's purview to make recommendations based upon a mutant strain of the virus. He is neither a doctor nor an epidemiologist. He provides several points outlining why school board meetings should not resume in person, so clearly it's his preference to keep the students virtual also. There are several logical changes in the buildings that can be made to get our students back to fully in person. To mention a few, remove the tables from the cafeterias, replace them with individual student desks to maximize the square footage and the number of students that can fit in the cafeteria. Surely the unused third floor of the high school had desks in those classrooms. Use them. Second, lockers should be provided to students. Even locker numbers visit after even number periods, odd number lockers visit after odd number periods. Arrival and dismissal can be completed in waves to reduce the number of students exiting and entering the building at once. I won't give you all of Mount Pleasant's tips and tricks that they're using right now to have their children returning to a fully in-person instruction 4 days
Mrs.
a
Dyer,
week.
you have 30 seconds.
So school board, I plead with you and the administration, we the parents who wish for our children to return to full 4 or 5 day in-person instruction, disregard Mr. Patonick's biased interpretation of DOH and PDE recommendations and put our children's education back on track. Our teachers are this district's best assets, but if our students do not have access to them, they cannot benefit from them. Our students deserve better.
Thank you. Mrs. Tarson, do we have any other comments?
Mr. Jan Kiefer.
Thank you. I'm just getting ready.
Mr. Kiefer, would you rather speak at the end?
No, I'm ready to go right now. I got all shook up when the administration was talking about the students who were not participating the most. They stopped short of saying they were going to send out the constable, but I would like to say that, like in our community, I think the churches should pick that up. Surely there's a church group out there that sees that there's a small, like 20, 50, 100, I don't know how many kids, maybe 4. But those children need to be reached. And if you're taking out your online, watching the video schooling doesn't work for them, then you have to give them something else. They need their $12,000 a year that we're spending on each child. They deserve that. And if you use your social scoring to criminalize their parents in a time of unprecedented social upheaval, I think that's going to backfire on you. And I would just get someone to research the Palmer raids, 1919, 1920. That was when the American government came in and took out people like we're talking about here. Next subject, this attestation. I don't understand that all, but I would say this, that you do not exchange the use of your school rooms for the use of your gymnasiums. That just can't happen. Again, in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, classrooms come over sports. And maybe someone needs to fill me in that it wasn't quite that simple, but that's all I'm getting from the public meetings. Gone are the days when we talked about having the golden days of having batting cages, indoor batting cages for the students. Right now, we're on life support, and we can also take advantage of our human capital in the community by bringing them in to help the teachers and bringing the teachers out to help the parents. I propose that the teachers have a 35-hour per week limit on working on schoolwork. Just like truck drivers, there's reasons why you can't overwork. But as we talk about the teacher's contract, I can think of 5 things offhand and 10 things that just are absolute necessary in a post-COVID contract. And I've expressed those before. That contract, 80% or 60% of the budget needs to come out in the public. We need to flesh out the terms so we can see what's going forward. If you lock us into a situation where we can't give education to the community, then you've really let us down. Mr. Masha seems to be the medical education or the medical authority on the board. And I'd like to know what his education, informal or informal, is. And then who is the resident medical authority? I think it should be the wellness director or the school nurse, but someone has to get in there and work on these terms. When I talk about testing, I'm talking about the PCR test that the swab test falls back onto, and the other tests. These tests are notorious wrong. That, again, the WHO has said that the World Health Organization has said we have big problems with this. There's people from all walks of the mainstream medicine telling you that these are senseless things, but yet you built all your policy on this test and have shown no demonstration from anyone on the board or anyone in the community of the issue at hand on that. We're coming up on mandatory vaccinations for children. I stood there 20 years ago in front of the school board waving a book on vaccinations. I've asked you month by month, when are we going to talk about vaccinations? So I'll talk about it. I think every teacher should be vaccinated except the ones with the autoimmune deficiencies. Otherwise, they're going to bring in their germs according to your theories and subject them to this. I don't think students should be vaccinated.
Time is up, Mr. Kiefer.
All right. Did you get all that dead time before, or did I just get 3 minutes to talk?
Your time started whenever Mrs. Tarson called on you and you said, okay. When your time started, sorry.
Will that be that way next time?
Well, I assume that when you come to speak, that you're prepared to speak.
I have to switch the computer over from the school board. All right, sorry, I'll get you at the end.
Do we have any other comments, Mrs. Tarson?
No, we do not.
Okay. Minutes of the following board meeting.
Board will be asked to consider the approval of the minutes of the virtual discussion meeting of January 14th, 2021.
Is there any discussion?
Yeah, Michelle, I think there's been a mistake. I don't have my paper right in front of me, but Peggy, I think it's on the second page where it says that we pay our debt service, and I think it says we pay that monthly. We only pay that annually. We only pay that once a year. I had it here and I lost it, too many papers. It just,
All right.
it's a small mistake. I mean, a small thing. It just says that instead of paying it monthly, we pay it annually. That's all.
Okay, I'll check into that. Thank you.
I think it's on page 3, Mrs. Tarson. I think that's what she's talking about. In that first, second paragraph, maybe. Thank
All
you.
right.
Comments?
Thanks.
Okay, January 2021 general fund check listing.
The board will be asked to consider the approval of the January 2021 general fund check listing.
Is there any discussion? Okay, January 2021 year-to-date general fund board summary.
The board will be asked to consider the approval of the January 2021 year-to-date general fund board summary.
Is there any discussion?
Yeah, I was wondering if we could get a little update as to how things are looking this school year.
I can see like the percentages, but I'm not sure what percentage we should be at used of the budget.
Mr. Marnell, are you able to comment on that?
Yes, I can comment on that. Regarding 1100, the regular elementary and secondary education expenditures as of January 31st, we have expended $6,537,000. That's 48.95% of that budget. I'm sorry, $6,536,684. That's 48.6% of the budget. $6,537,000 or 48.95% of the budget was last year as of January 31st, 2020 versus January 31st, 2021. So for 1100 regular elementary and secondary education, we are about on par with last year as far as percent used, 48.95% last year, 48.6% this year. The special education category 1200. Last year, as of January 31st, we expended $1,975,000. I'm leaving out the dollars in the hundreds. 47.545% used. This year, we have expended $1,867,000 or 45.01%. So we are ahead in that category, $107,000. For vocational education, 1,300 functions. We expended last year $343,000, 81% of the budget. This year, $318,510, 66.7% of the budget. 1,400 category, other instruction, last year, year-to-date, $89,500, 29.94%. This year, $50,077 for 20.7%.
Mr. Marnell,
Yes.
are there any areas before you go through the rest of that, because I can see that, are there any areas that you're concerned about? I should have asked that differently. Are there any areas you're concerned about other than cyber that we're going to be extremely?
Well, you're right, correct. The report that I submitted to you last week regarding the cyber charter school tuition is a concern to us, of course. As far as other areas, let me take a look through my analysis here. That was obviously my main area of concern. I do not see any other areas as a concern as that. Charter school tuition, and of course we had the projection on the SOLA expenditures. Year to date, of course, January 31st, 2021, we have expended $14,342,000, 45% of the budget. Last year at this time, January 31st, 2020, we expended $14,831,000, 48% of the budget. So of course, because we're in a pandemic and there are certain expenditures that we have not incurred, such as busing for sports, other busing, normal daily busing because of virtual education, our individual van drivers and van aides not working because we were in virtual. There were separate layoffs of custodians on and off during this season, and of course security personnel in other areas. So it's distorted to look at the fact that comparing last January 31st to this January 31st, we have spent less than last year, $489,000. So I don't want that to be projected towards the year end, because again, we're working through a situation that we truly don't know what is going to happen to us and the community for the rest of this school year. But that's how we stand January to January. So yes, the area with cyber charter school tuition is a concern, but as a number of us have discussed, we hope that that is a blip, an anomaly because of what we're going through. As far as revenue, let me take a look at my sheets on revenue. As of the end of January of 2020, taxes levied and collected. We collected last year, as of January 31st, $10,355,000. Of course, we had to raise taxes for the budgetary situation. So keep in mind that as of January 31st of this year, in taxes levied, we have collected $10,614,000. So that's a net increase of $260,000. Now, in delinquent taxes collected, we are up compared January of this year, year end, to January year to date last year. We collected $232,000. I'm sorry, we didn't collect, it was remitted over to us by the taxing authorities, the two counties. $232,000 last year, $414,000 as of the end of January this year. So surprisingly, we are up $182,000 in delinquent tax collections. The one area that's down, and it's uncontrollable because the Federal Reserve controls it, is the interest rates on money invested. As of the end of January 2020 last year, of course, before the pandemic hit, and the decisions made by the Federal Reserve to help stimulate the economy, we had collected $49,729 in interest revenue. As of the end of January this year, only $3,321. So we are down $46,000, but that is what it is, unfortunately. So let me get to the end of the revenues. Now, the one thing also we have to keep in mind is the fact that there are certain stimulus monies that we took in this year that we didn't have last year during the 1920 fiscal year. So, but anyway, as of the end of January 31st of 2020, we had received $19,128,000 of our budgeted revenues. That was about 62%. This year we have received $20,034,000, roughly 65%. However, let me add in that we did collect net proceeds from the sale of the Roughdale school building, net proceeds of $138,357. So, of course, that's an extraordinary item that you don't normally have. So that distorts that difference between year-to-date revenues. We also received this year $531,888 so far in stimulus funding regarding the federal funding, the CARES Act, so on and so forth. So if we, let's say, remove the Roughdale net proceeds and the federal stimulus, comparing January of last year to January this year, our net revenues are up a little over $236,000, which I think is expected regarding the fact that we did have to raise property taxes. So as far as an expenditure item, I am concerned, as others are, with the cyber school tuition. I hope that, Ms. Smith, that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there any other questions?
There's an agenda item later on that says budget updates. Is that going to be different than what we're talking about now? Because I have questions, but they're about the budget. This is like the treasurer's report versus budget updates. I just don't want to ask it at the wrong time.
I'm available to answer any questions at this moment, or we can wait until that segment of the agenda.
Are you okay with that, Dr. Fike, if we wait till we get to budget, if they are for next year?
Yeah, that's why I asked, yeah. Mhm.
Okay. All right. Any other comments? Okay, December 2020 Treasurer's Report.
Board will be asked to consider the approval of the December 2020 Treasurer's Report.
Are there any comments? Okay, Superintendent Information.
Mr. Pushkar, could you upload that document? And while Mr. Pushkar is doing that, I would like to recognize the hard work and the efforts of our borough and township road crews. They have been out diligently working to keep the roads clear. It's been a little different winter than it has been in the last several years, and I wanted to just take the time to recognize and thank them for all they've done to keep the roads clear. Also, speaking of inclement weather, on days when we are forced to resort to a remote instruction day, if it were today being a B day, our students would go to they would follow their B day schedule. And then when we come back the next day, if being tomorrow, we would resume with the A day. So just to help make or clear up any misconceptions, if it is a remote instruction, we would follow that letter day that it would be designated. And when we come back, we would resume with the next day. I know there were some questions out there, so I hope I could add some clarity to that. As we stated last week, we were looking to deliver a plan for live daily instruction. What I have here is the outline of that plan. I would like to begin the implementation of this plan on this coming Monday, February 15th. As stated last week, the elementary school is already leveraged to achieve this. So student schedules and instruction delivery K to 5 would remain the same. It is basically the secondary that we will be talking about. Each student will follow his or her daily schedule as they are in person while they are virtual learners. A note that must be made here is that there may be changes to a student's schedules, their current schedule times to meet this need. So there could be a little flexing of schedules in order to achieve this. Teachers will provide Zoom meeting links daily for in-person and virtual learners. These links will continue to be posted on the Google Classroom form that we're already using now. Instruction will be provided via Zoom Meet for all students, with recorded material being available upon request. We will come back to that at a later time here to further add clarity to that. All instructional materials will be posted in the Google Classroom. Attendance procedures will remain the same. Students will be marked present when attending Zoom times. Students will continue to complete the Google form for attendance. Teachers will provide office hours for additional support. So our teachers will be there to give additional aid to anyone struggling or having questions. And students wishing to be solely asynchronous will need to have requests approved by building principals. And I would like to repeat that. Students wishing to be solely asynchronous would need to reach out to their building level principals and have a request approved for that. Okay, the administrative team, I don't know if you have anything else that you would like to add to that before I move on.
May I ask a question before you move on?
Sure.
If I know that at the high school, well, I'm assuming at the high school that there's teachers that teach almost every period, and then they have to have a planning period. So when would their office hours be for students?
we're going to be re-implementing what we used to call at the high school the intervention period,
Okay.
which we want to stay consistent with other buildings. We're going to call it the student support period.
Okay. So that would be when they could, anybody who has a question with anything could visit whatever teacher they need to, basically.
Yeah, that's how it worked in the past.
Okay.
There are also other times within the days, could be as early as that time period in which the teachers are there prior to the start, which is 7:35. Our teachers arrive at 7:05. There's a 30-minute block there. There are also teaming periods that can be utilized for that as well.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I have a quick question. Was everything that you were just discussing for people who are electing to be all virtual, or was that for kids who are going on the AB schedule?
I don't know, Mr. Mash, where you're heading. Are you going to discuss down below, or do you want me to answer?
Yeah, I'm just trying to clarify if what we just talked about, who exactly that applied to. I kind of missed it, and I keep trying to scroll up on the document, and then I remember it's not my screen, and I can't scroll up on the document. So.
Yeah, I just tried doing the same thing there. It is for those students that currently right now are in the AB, and the ones that are fully virtual can remain fully virtual. They also have the option, if they would like to come back into the AB hybrid model and go live, they can do that.
Okay, so, okay, I might have another question, but
in short, if I can say this in short and kind of box it up nicely, currently we have a synchronous, asynchronous model. What you do on AB is live, or on day A is live, and then when you're at home, you do work asynchronously, which is not live. We're basically transferring, still keeping the AB roster format, which means the A kids show up on day A, B on day B, except now it's going to be live instruction every day. So when you're at home, you're now going to log on to the live instruction that is being taught in the classroom at that moment.
Okay, so then I guess my question then is that this is only going to apply to 6 to 12. This is not going to apply to K through 5.
Yes.
Correct.
Okay, that's okay.
So Mrs. Raymond, before we go any further, so I had a moment of clarity as to why a system like this won't work for K through 5. Because I was kind of like, why aren't we doing that? A lot of our K through 5 students need a parent to sit with them to do their work. So if you're a working family, you're going to have to come home and asynchronously be sitting with your student at night to do that whole day's worth of work, because when they go back into school the following day, they're going to have moved on. So if you've had a rough day at work and you don't get to sit down with your child and do, say they're an A and it's now day B, and you're doing, we have given you the recordings so that you could sit and watch them in the evenings, your child's not going to be caught up on the B day before they would go back to another A. And that teacher would have moved on. Like, that's the whole purpose. Am I making sense? Because I don't know. But that was my thing, is you would have to sit for hours in the evening going through an entire day of class time for your student to be caught up to that same point.
Okay, I understand what you're saying. Okay. My concern is just that I am concerned that K through 5 is getting half of the education. And I completely understand the point that you're making. I completely understand that 100%. But conversely, I'm also concerned that K through 5 is getting half of the education when teachers are teaching the same lesson 2 days in a row. So that is, I guess, my other concern about it from the other side as well. So.
Mr. Clare, are you there to add some insight to that?
I am. Thanks for asking. I would say that really we're doing very targeted instruction. Sometimes with smaller numbers, we can do some very specific things, and that can really be important. especially if we're concerned about the development of gaps for students as it relates to last year and early into this year. So maybe not going so fast is a good thing. I could make a really good case, and I have several times now, that cramming our curriculum with as many things as we could possibly expose kids to as quickly as possible, in case it could be on a nationally normed test, is not necessarily the best instructional model. And I think taking our time and really working on those skills and making sure that we've got them is just as important. I could argue maybe even more important. So it's knowing the right things to spend time on and really focusing on them. And I think we'll get more out of our instruction if we do that. So thank you.
And since Mr. Clara mentioned it, I joined the superintendent conference this morning, and as of right now, there is no guidance from PDE on whether or not the PSSA and Keystones will be taking place this year. So right now there is not any changes, but I do know that PDE is seeking waivers from the federal government to see if we can not be testing. So I just thought that was important, since it was mentioned about the testing.
And Mr. Masha, if I could jump on that too, I was part of a couple meetings this week where they spoke about the same thing. And they said that the state has to apply for a waiver from the federal government. They were kind of waiting to see what the new administration was going to say about all this. And I think that what PDE is trying to ask our legislators to do is don't wait, just apply for it, because obviously we're all in a very interesting situation. And they also asked anyone to please reach out to their congressmen or senators to ask them to please ask our senators and congressmen to apply for a waiver and ask for that to be done, just so that testing isn't one more thing this year that they would have to worry about.
Thank you very much for that, Mrs. Smith. And it was mentioned that in talking about the emotional impact of students this year, facing major testing would just add to that. So that there is also an emotional psychological component to lend credence to the opting out of the testing process. Mr. Pushkar, can you, I've been trying to scroll down again.
Give me 1 second.
Technology is not our friend. Okay, there are expectations for the synchronous instruction. Live synchronous lessons in Zoom will follow the student's typical in-person schedule. Once again, period by period attendance will be recorded for all classes. Daily attendance for all students will be recorded by the teacher at the first period, and students are expected to attend their daily synchronous lessons. That's important. Live lessons via Zoom will provide direct and meaningful instruction from the classroom teacher, and we are allowing the teacher to use their discretion as to when to close the Zoom meetings. There could be some pertinent conversation or discussion that students might be privy to that would be benefit up to them. So we're allowing that teacher the discretion to determine when they're going to close that Zoom meeting. Can you scroll down, Mr. Pushkar? Recordings will be made available upon a request by students who are ill or who have excused absences. However, recordings are not to be used by students in lieu of attendance in synchronous sessions. We believe that it's important for those students to be present in those synchronous sessions, unless there is otherwise approval by their building level principal for those asynchronous instructions. If a student is ill, we're asking those students to please reach out to the attendance secretary stating the reason for their being ill. Synchronous instruction will not take place on days when a substitute teacher is in a classroom. Instead, the classroom teacher will notify families, which they are currently doing now through their Google Classroom, about the change in schedule, and will provide asynchronous assignments in Google Classrooms for the students working remotely. Teachers will be provided with a shared Google Doc of students who are participating in the asynchronous model. That way everyone is on the same page, and those students, we can facilitate their instruction to the highest degree. These students will be approved by the building level principal, and we want to stress that we really believe that it's important for students to be in a synchronous option. So we are going to be taking case-by-case situations for the approval. We are also asking students and their families to make a decision before February 19th at the close of business, which is 3 p.m., as to whether or not they are going to be attending the in-person hybrid or the virtual model. We're asking also that this decision be held until the end of the third marking period. We never know what's going to be happening here in the future, so we would like to at least hold it and be consistent through the end of the third marking period here. And there is a Google form that will be posted on the middle and high school websites where parents can go in and make that request for asynchronous learning through that Google form. I don't know if there's any other insight from the administrative team or if there are any questions that we could ask from the board, but I don't know.
I think we're able to pare down a lot of stuff into this document here. It does spell it out pretty succinctly. But again, as the principal as well, we do have a number of students that are on asynchronous models. We would like to get as many of our students into this synchronous platform as possible, with the understanding that there are exigencies that do call for that situation. We don't want to allow to happen is the student doesn't feel like getting up every day, so therefore they're going to request an asynchronous option. We have to have legitimate reasons, hence the form for us to review, working with the parents, the student, the teachers, all stakeholders to make the decision as to what will be the best fit for the student moving forward.
How does this schedule apply to vote tech, work study, things like that?
Tech would remain the way that it is. They would, we already have a system of transportation for the remote days. So the students would just continue to go to tech in person. They allow the option of 5-day in person. Actually, it's 4 right now because Wednesdays are remote. So it doesn't impact tech at all.
Do they have to submit a request though?
In what manner, Dr. Fike?
Like you said, the parents have to make a decision. Do they have to submit any kind of a decision about hybrid or in person or virtual?
Yeah, we have a form that if they're seeking, and we're assuming that the default is AB with the live synchronous off day instruction. If you're already in some kind of format that exists, virtually. We would like to have a commitment on that by Friday of the next week. But that won't affect tech. That's just, we're assuming everybody's AB synchronous unless you fill out the form and request for a specific reason to go or to stay completely virtual.
So in essence, this is the middle school and high school having their own all virtual option, possibly, for ones who want to be all virtual. Is that correct?
Yeah, because they will be basically linked into the classroom every day.
Right. So that's
Yeah.
a good thing. Yeah.
Are there any other questions?
Thank you, Mr. Pushkar.
Okay.
That's all I have, Mrs. Williams.
Okay, thank you. Business managers report.
Yes, I did submit to the school board a number of items this week. One of the items was I updated my running analysis of the school district's historic fund balances. And I started back with the ending of the 07-08 fiscal year, and I added the closing of the 1920 fiscal year. Were there any questions on that particular report? Just for the public to know, we ended last fiscal year with a surplus of $610,404. Now, our auditing firm, Mr. Mark Turnley, would like to present his final audit at our March 18th school board meeting. If you are approving of that, perhaps you can slot him in at the beginning of the meeting, or perhaps under this section of school business managers report. I also sent out to the school board and the quick analysis of the governor's budget proposal. Of course, I hate to say this, but I don't recommend going with the governor's numbers until such time as the legislature actually approves the budget and the governor signs it, which probably will not be until after June 1st anyway. But the governor had proposed a significant increase to public schools in funding. For Southmoreland School District in particular, I had started off our budget process with that preliminary proposed budget back in January of our basic education subsidy of $9,759,809, which is what we are slated to receive during this current fiscal year. He's proposing, and the Department of Education put out the documentation of an increase to the Southmoreland District of $9,891,371. That's an increase of $140,562. And the next biggest category is special education subsidy. Currently, for this school year, we are to receive $1,463,797. The governor is proposing, again, a significant increase statewide for special education. For the Southmoreland School District, $1,623,769, an increase of $159,972. So if you add the two together, that's $300,534. Again, my recommendation is that as we go through the drafting of a budget, that we hold our numbers at the current level for this fiscal year. Let me see.
My questions were about these documents.
I'm trying to see. The other information I sent out was just an update of numbers that's in our accounting system. I called it the second working draft of the general fund budget. Similar summary as what you saw last month, showing estimated revenues, estimated expenditures, and estimated beginning fund balance. But anyway, as it looks right now, local revenues are estimated at, and again, these numbers are all subject to change. It's early in the winter, and of course, as we go through the winter months into the spring months, I will keep looking at year-to-date numbers, comparing them with historical numbers, and updating the numbers accordingly. But right now, local revenues are projecting for next year to be $13,126,714. That's 42% of total revenues, and that's including a possible projected Act 1 tax increase. State revenues, again, I'm holding them steady. $17,244,895. That's 56% of our potential revenue sources for next year. And of course, right now I'm only counting the Title I, Title II, and Title IV grants under federal revenues. That's $549,387, 2% of revenues. Now, right now there is the administration and other stakeholders are going to be working on the what to do, what to consider for the second round of the ESSERS 2 funding, projected to be around $1,500,000, and what that would mean to our district and how to expend those funds. And they do not have to be expended next year. They can be spread out until, if I understand it, until September of 2023. But if I'm wrong on that, please somebody speak up. But anyway, there's a group led by Dr. Clara to look at that and to consider what to plan to utilize those funds for. Currently, estimated revenues are at $32,867,053. So if you look at right now, total planned revenues, $30,920,996. Right now, expenditures are at $32,867,053. There's a gap between revenues and expenditures of $1,946,000. But be cognizant of the fact that, and I know you are, that there is a significant, nearly $1 million, but actually I think a little over $1 million of what we're looking at this year, using a worst case scenario, projecting to next year for increase in SOLA costs, which is our E-Academy, and of course cyber charter school costs. $317,000 for the SOLA as a potential increase, and $696,000 for charter school tuition. Now, we're all hoping that this pandemic is brought under control, and we will not experience what we're experiencing currently because of the pandemic situation. That's over $1 million. So again, that's a worst case scenario. So I sent out that budget. Again, the budget is a continuous work in progress. It's not done yet, of course. So I think that is the extent of the information I sent out. If there's any thoughts or questions on that, let me stop here and let's discuss them.
Say that you put out another budget.
No, no, ma'am. I did not put out another budget. What that is an update of the numbers. See, the only budget, if you want to call it that was put out was what we discussed last month.
Right.
So again, we opted out of the Act 1 timeline. So what we're going through are what we call drafts. And of course, as numbers get sharpened, as information comes to light, we input that into our budgeting system. So again, as those as facts get clarified, new information comes in. Departments sharpen what they're looking at. I know the new facility director is looking at all the potential needs of school buildings and grounds. That information will be added and will be communicated to you. So again, it's a running tally, so to speak, and not a new budget at all.
Okay, I'm looking at these two documents that I do have, and from what I can tell, we have $610,000 left over from last year. Is that correct?
Well, actually, that was the surplus, accounting surplus.
That's what's left over.
For last year, and that gets added to the accumulated fund balance that was brought forward from prior years.
Okay, it's in the fund balance. It's not in our revenue. Is that right?
Well, that's correct. See, when you close your books, you close your revenues against your expenditures, and the net difference gets posted to in the real world, it's called net profit. In the accounting world, it's called fund balance, but it means the same thing. So when you close your books, you close your revenues against your expenditures. The difference goes to and of course to us private individuals, it's called net worth. So it goes to fund balance.
So we had $610,000 left from last year. According to your projections, we're going to get another $300,500 from the state. Maybe. Is that right? Maybe?
Well, of course, that is a very big maybe, because unlike the old days, when a governor put out a budget address, you could literally bank on those numbers. But of course, politics being what they have been in recent years, you cannot count on what the governor is asking for and projecting, and a lot of that increase for public schools and other departments that the state funds is based on a change in the tax structure, an increase in taxes, and again, I hate to be pessimistic, but I don't want us to count on those numbers yet.
Okay, well,
if they come to pass as they are, great. Then of course we'll recognize those in June, and we all hope in this industry that the state passes their budget before we have to pass ours. Now, it's not always been the case, but let's hope that they come to some resolution, and we know what our state subsidies will be before we have to pass our budget.
Mrs. Williams.
Yes.
May I add an insight? We had at our superintendent meeting this morning, it was recommended by the IU and that the districts plan on flat funding from the state. So just to give you an idea that was discussed today at our IU superintendent meeting.
okay, that helps answer my questions, because I'm looking at $610,000 left from last year, another $300,500 the good governor's going to give us. I'm looking at increased revenue of like $450,000, according to what you're saying for tax collections and stuff. So I'm thinking, we have like $1.5 million just extra money if this stuff is all true. So why are we going to increase taxes? I can't understand why we would increase taxes. I don't understand why we had a $610,000 surplus from last year and we cut curriculum. Maybe I'm not smart, but it seems to me that I'm dealing with very foggy numbers here. And when you get down to the reality, maybe it's going to be a whole different ballgame.
Hey, Dr. Fike, I think, so if I'm understanding correctly, the $610,000, we took over $800,000 out of the fund balance to balance the budget last year. So that $610,000 really offsets that number, correct, Mr. Marnell? So like
that was for this school year. We took 800,000 out.
Okay, but we're putting 600 back. What did we take out last year?
Well, now let's clarify. when we passed the budget in June,
Mhm.
we accepted as a worst case scenario that we could possibly lose a little over $800,000 in collectible revenues because of the pandemic situation, which would come out of the fund balance that would have been ended June 30th, 2020. And of course, we have to see how the school district runs out as far as revenues that are collected. Now, let me say that currently, I'm not seeing that amount of shortfall in revenue collections. But with public schools and other governmental entities, we close our books once a year, and that's at the end of a fiscal year. But looking at year to date, as we were discussing earlier, I think we're steady, maybe slightly, if we looked at historical numbers, slightly behind historical numbers, but not to the extent that PASBO was projecting for school districts and in particular to our own district. But again, it's hard to project the effect of an economic decline, a pandemic situation, because the only period that they had to look at and study was the Great Recession that happened back in 08, 09, and 2010. But I think it was wise to be conservative with that. So let's pick up the conversation there. So we didn't take any money out, but we were looking at the possibility that we might have to draw on fund balance. So we want to be cautious with that, and we don't want to spend money that we haven't collected yet. For example, the $300,000 from what the governor would like to see Southmoreland receive, and of course other districts. We don't want to count on that yet.
That's linked to a sales tax increase, correct?
Well, that's part of it. See, the other part of that is a change in the personal income tax structure in the state. And of course, will all those tax changes come to fruition? Well, we don't know. I'm not going to count on them personally myself, and I would recommend that we don't count on that as of yet. We have to see what happens during the whole legislative state budget discussions.
So can we look at these fund balance numbers on that chart? 1819, the unassigned fund balance was 2,437,000. The next year was 2,537,000. It went up 100,000, and the unassigned went up from 2 to 7. So when you say we took $800,000 out of there, where am I seeing that?
Well, now remember, we didn't take any money out. When we planned the 2021 budget, the 2020-2021 budget, when we planned that and passed that budget last June of 2020, the budget was passed with an imbalance between revenues and expenses. And the imbalance was we were accepting as a worst case scenario the potential loss in local revenues due to the pandemic situation, a little over $800,000. So the potential of a deficit of $800,000 was planned. We didn't move any money. We didn't spend any money. Right. Again, that was on paper. That was on a budget document. And that's something that we all accepted as a worst case scenario, and we planned accordingly. So you're looking at a document where the fiscal year ended 1920, which was June 30th of 2020. So there was no money taken out of that. Now, perhaps when you see this chart a year from now, well, a little over a year from now, with the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2021, let's hope that we didn't lose $800,000 from our fund balances, that if we lose anything, that it's considerably less than that. We don't know yet. So yes, last fiscal year, we did end up with a net positive surplus. But that was for a lot of different circumstances because of the extraordinary, maybe that's not the right word, extraordinary, the anomaly that was last year, especially the last quarter of that fiscal year.
Jim,
And
if
we will discuss it a lot further when Mr. Turnley comes in with his audit, because I'm using his final numbers. We work very closely together, and I agree with his final number. And I mean, again, that's good news that we added to the fund balance. It wasn't counted on because we had less expenditures than we planned on because of the pandemic situation. But anyway, you know.
But Jim, in your earlier report today, you seem to feel that we were on par, that there was not a big problem. Is that right?
Well, I don't know if I said there's not a big problem. Again, we're trying to compare this January 31st to last January 31st. Now, the potential big problem is in the increase in cyber charter school tuition. Again, that report is only through January 31st. Now, the report that I sent out to the school board, I believe it was early last week or maybe the week before, was my projection based on current enrollments in the various cyber charter schools of what that would mean over the course of the whole fiscal year compared to what we had budgeted for this current fiscal year, and of course, added to the bottom of that report was where we stand with what's called the SOLA program, the Southmoreland Online, which we utilize the Westmoreland IU e-Academy platform. Mm-hmm. And of course, the enrollment in that is up from where it was projected a year ago. But again, we're trying to make projections in the face of a tsunami of devastating proportions, a pandemic, which country hasn't faced in over 100 years. So, we're in uncharted territories, uncharted waters. So we're all statewide, nationwide, trying to deal with a situation that we have not foreseen, and we're all doing the best that we can. Let's give ourselves all credit, both on a personal and on a community level, that we're trying to deal with it as best that we can. So yes,
I don't hold you to every penny, but we can't deal with inflated numbers.
I don't know what you mean by inflated numbers.
$300,000.
This chart that is out is historic numbers, not inflated numbers.
No. I'm talking about the $300,000 that you think Wolf is going to give us. That's not.
Well, that's not what I think. That's what the governor put out. That's public information. So it's not what I think. It's what the governor put out. And I'm just reporting to all of you in the community. That's what the governor put out. It's not what I think at all. It's what is actual. Will it come to pass? We don't know. Only the legislature knows. And of course, those discussions are going to take place from last week when he put out his budget till they pass a budget. So no, it's not what I think. It's what actually was put out by the governor's office and by the governor himself.
We should not consider that as income.
Well, I don't myself.
Okay.
But I have to report the situation, and I have to report the information that I received. And of course, I attended a virtual online webinar by the Pennsylvania Association School Business Officials as they went through the numbers. And of course, anybody can get the numbers from the Pennsylvania Department of Education website, and of course, the governor's website. But PASBO goes through the numbers in detail, and there's a lot of boring information, if you will, as they talk about it. And of course, they pre-record. I mean, they record all their webcasts. So if anybody wants to watch what they discuss, you'd be glad to sit with me and we'll play it back. But again, I was just reporting the numbers as the governor put them out, as PASBO and of course PSBA and PASA had publicized. So again, I'm not counting on them. I'm not making the numbers up. They are what they are.
Mr. Marnell, just for clarification, the $1.9 million that were technically over revenues includes revenues using the Act 1 increase, correct? If you're already showing the Act 1 increase in our revenues.
Hey, let me open up that particular, you're talking about the one-page summary that's titled second working draft?
Yeah, I think you said the number is 13,126,714, and that included the tax increase.
That does include the Act 1 tax increase, yes.
Okay, so then the 1.9 million that is the difference, that's already including raising the taxes to the Act 1 index.
That is correct.
But it also, just to be clear, it also includes putting more money than we spent this year towards cyber school for next year,
That is correct.
which I don't agree with that.
But more money or equal money?
More.
How much more?
696,000.
So the 696,000, is that what that's the extra that we're spending this year? Or is that in addition to the extra we're spending this year?
That is the projected extra if the forecast works out with the current numbers. Let's assume that none of those children return from the date of that report till the end of the year. That is the projected extra that we will expend over what we had budgeted for the current year.
Okay. So even if you took that number away, we're still $1.2 million different than our income.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Does anybody else have any questions? Mr. Marnell, do you know when, I think I had sent you an email and you had responded back in regards to people getting the budget binder. I don't know if everybody wants one. I don't know what everybody's wishes were, but he had sent out an email asking how people wanted that, if you wanted it emailed to you or you wanted an actual physical copy of it. If you could please all let him know that. I did offer to pick them up for people, or you all could pick them up at the buildings, just so that we're not having that as an expenditure to mail those out again. But do you have any idea when those might be available?
I have already started running off the actual pages. I have run off the pages for each individual school building, and I have to run off pages for the other departments. Some of the printouts will have some overlap in them. For example, if you look at the facilities department, the function known as 2620, buildings and grounds, they are included in the individual sort based on school building. And of course, they will also be included when I just run them as their own department. And I thought that's what I would do for you. And then of course, there also will be the run of all the detailed pages from A to Z, like they were last year. So you'll have different ways to look at them. Now, we will put them in binders for you, for those of you like myself who like to have the paper to write on and make notes. But I can also send them out via email for those of you who want to start looking at them on the email until you get the actual binder. I'm glad, I will be glad to start emailing those out, and as well as we're going to start putting them into binders. And of course, binding them up takes some time, of course. And Mrs. Lane and I will start working on that. I've started making individual master copies and laying them on a work table for us to use to make our copies from. So yes, I can do both for you. It's your choice, or you can have both. It's fine with me.
So I'd like to request a binder, and I'll pick it up.
Very good.
Thank you, Dr. Fife.
I'll let you know when it's ready.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Does anybody else have anything else for the business manager? Okay, solicitor information.
My information is basically related to a choice on bringing back physical presence meetings. And last month there was a version that was out and it was tabled. And I studied that and I drafted another version that I have given you. And in it, I tried to italicize the portions that were changed. I think there had been, and I still don't know the answer to this as to whether or not a videographer is available. Obviously, if one is and you hire one, then you're ready to go. If you do not have one, but you think you're getting one in the future, and you want to go back to physical presence meetings, which is a separate question and your decision, then you could still proceed with either one of these. And it would be once the person is actually hired, then the board secretary would see to the advertisement and sending out notices to you so that you would know, projecting that, okay, at this hearing on or meeting at such and such a date is we've got a videographer, we've already passed a resolution, and you're going to go with it. So the historical situation is that situation has gotten better since it was around Thanksgiving, early December, and the only county that is in substantial is one criteria in Fayette County. That's more for an informational item. So then all the way back on page 4, you still have an option as to if you do go back physical, do you want to continue to take written comment? If you do, it's in there. And there's a method for them to submit it. I changed section 6 by adding a section so that people would be alert that, oh, there's a possibility that for certain circumstances, you might want to have an executive session due to its length or necessity that wouldn't jive with a Thursday meeting. So 6B indicates that in addition to section 2, which spells out when your executive sessions would be, non-Thursday meetings are permitted under the open meeting law, as permitted under the open meeting law, and pursuant to the above-based scheduling, due to availability considerations and the difficulty in having adequate time in the 6 p.m. or 6:30 p.m. starting times and work and travel time considerations of members. There have been some nights when board's gone past 7 o'clock or you really need more time. So then section 7 is the same as to your capacity and calculations. So I don't know if those stickers are still there, but Mr. Mashal would still have to see to making sure that the designated seating spots were marked. The thing that is more specific in section 11 is designating restrooms, which is required by previous orders. So you would have the male and female restrooms adjacent to the gymnasium for the public. You could then qualify for multiple restrooms, which is what we were trying to do by designating the persons present at the board table on meeting days to utilize the male or female respective rooms at the band and chorus hallway. I designated the entry and exit points. You're supposed to have some signage for that. If the administration were to come up with extras, they could do that. And then just to remind everybody, I can't think of a way to time entrance and exits officially for a public meeting for which people, when you have physical presence, aren't required to sign up in advance and get a ticket like you do when you go to a show. Doesn't work. So I put in the public and attendees should time their entrance and exits to prevent congregating at or in entrance and exit doors. And then the resolution for board public meeting procedure additions to the agenda when meeting is in virtual, telephonic, or electronic mode adopted on January 21 also applies when you have both physical and virtual happening simultaneously. So I put in also apply to this resolution and public meetings conducted pursuant to it, so that people who are participating from home would still have the opportunity to make public comment without having to be physically present. And then I recommended that the resolution as adopted should be placed in the Southmoreland website. So those were the changes made to the one that was tabled last week. Makes it more specific. And so it's up to the board to decide whether you want to have physical presence meetings yet. Do you have the videographer? Are you going to get one? And if you do want to have them, if you want to go with the one that was tabled last week, where this one's much more specific and I think demonstrates an attempt to comply with all these orders.
Mr. Petonic, you're saying if we don't have a videographer, none of this means anything, right?
It doesn't mean any, well, you could pass it, but it would not take effect until you get one, and then you'd have to hire that person.
Okay, I'm gonna go
that's
back to
another
the
meeting.
whole, I don't
That's
think we
another-
need a videographer. I do not think we need to be spending money on hiring a videographer for something that we can do ourselves. This is not rocket science. It just doesn't have to be done. We can just go back to meetings. As for coming in and out of the building, how do the high schoolers do it every day? Let's take their thing. You know, they have to have a process, correct? Right? So we can do the same thing that they're doing. Like I said, with the whole videographer thing, we can easily do this just with a Zoom meeting. We need the same people that we have right now. We need someone to start the meeting, which could be any of us. And we need somebody to broadcast it to YouTube.
I think the problem was to attempt to show all of the members on the stage, and
Sure,
maybe
we can
Mr.
do that.
Nasher, you can help me on this part, to broadcast it over YouTube so that they, plus the people who, the administrators, et cetera, are attending by Zoom,
Right.
could
So
be
I
picked
don't,
up on the screen. Now, if I'm wrong about that, I apologize, but that was the information I was given.
no. So what I'm thinking is, and I've seen other places do it, is you have one computer at the school. Say we're on the high school stage. So we have a computer, bigger monitor, whatever. That monitor will be showing the people who are on the stage. Just like it used to show everybody from a very far away zoomed out. You didn't see everybody's specific faces, okay? So that's one Zoom square, we'll say, on our little squares here. Anyone who can't come can be their own Zoom meeting square. So then all you need to do is take some teacher's Elmo and put it up on the screen so we can see everybody else that's not there. Same process, hit it live to YouTube. We should be good.
Good. Can I offer a little information towards this? The technology and the setup of the equipment isn't at issue here. We have the technology, a dedicated laptop, projector, webcam, everything necessary to do what you're talking about, just as you described. Okay. What's at issue here is who manages it all, who takes care of setting it all up and tearing it down at the beginning and end of the meeting, because board meetings will be taking place in the auditorium of the high school, which on the next given school day would be utilized by students. So there's quite a bit of wires and cables and an expensive laptop and projector that are just sitting out if those things should be gathered up and put away. Then there's also the process of starting the recording of the Zoom meeting, starting the stream to YouTube. And I realize that, it's not rocket science, anybody can do it, but who's that person? Who attends every single meeting to set all of this up, tear all this down, and make sure that it all happens every single board meeting?
Can you train us how to do it?
We've already have the money budgeted for the position of the person that recorded the board meetings. It's still in the budget. It's not hiring a new position. That position already exists. The person that used to do it just resigned from it and it was never filled. The position was never filled.
So this budgeted money covers every single meeting we have, no matter how many millions of hours they are.
Well, that's the way it's been in the past.
But is that how it is right now?
The money that's budgeted is for the position of recording the board meetings. I'm not speaking as to what the stipulations are. I'm just saying that the money is budgeted for that position. The position is just currently unfilled.
Mr. Botanic, is this for 2 meetings a month or for every meeting we have, no matter how long? Because I think that's a big difference. If we're doing 2 meetings a month and then every other meeting we have is an hourly fee, that's huge.
And I think
Well, that goes back to.
That's the whole
what
point. There's a
the
lot of work.
discussion was between, what was posted, and I think there was information given to you by the superintendent at some point about who was willing to do.
Yeah, we never got a
meetings?
real answer on that. I think.
Well, then that's what you need. You need that answer. I don't know.
So
I'm not in charge of that.
Until we find someone, can we set up a laptop just to do this?
The equipment's already available and then can be in place.
Like without all the, without all the wires and everything, just a plugged in laptop. Would that work until we can figure this out, what we need to do?
Again, who starts the Zoom meeting and streams it?
I think we can all start a Zoom meeting. I just don't feel like we need to put this off anymore. And I also don't think that we should be spending money on something like this if it's something we can do ourselves.
I would be more than willing to show anybody how to do it.
Can I ask a question? How much money was budgeted for this? How much money are we talking?
The original position, I believe, was about 1,502.
But we're not sure if that's just 2 meetings a month or if that's every meeting that we would have. Right?
Historically, in the past, Mr. Pushkar, that was for any meeting that we had. Were there multiple meetings in some months where we had budget meetings? Did that person have to be present for all those meetings?
The meeting had to be recorded one way or the other. Once we started recording meetings, that person was present for every meeting.
there at the end, nobody was there present. I thought we just had the camera and it was recording. I don't think.
It didn't happen by itself. Somebody sat at a computer. Mr. Smithula sat in his house, just as I'm doing right now, every board meeting, and clicked start the recording and end the recording. It just doesn't happen without human intervention.
So, and I don't know, Mr. Pushkar, I'm not sure what you do on your end, but, and I don't know if it's as simple as this. I could be very wrong, but I've run meetings where I've live streamed them to YouTube or to Facebook. Is that what we're talking about?
Yes, that's what we're talking about, and setting up the the camera. So, I mean, for what we're talking about is we're talking about showing the board members that are on the stage, the board members that are on stage, also seeing anybody that's participating virtually in a Zoom session, and all of that being streamed to YouTube. So there are, you know, there's a little bit of equipment set up to make all of that happen.
Does anybody else have any thoughts on this?
Who set up the equipment when they did it in the cafeteria?
The person that got the stipend. I mean, I don't know if you remember Mr. Pollard behind back where the cafeteria tables, setting up microphone cables and adjusting cameras and moving sound system sliders and adjusting the volume on everybody, but he did that every single board meeting.
And he took it all down?
And yes, he put it all away at the end of the board meeting.
So, Mr. Pushkar, if we moved back to the middle school, that camera's already there, correct?
That camera is already there.
Yes. I'm sorry.
That camera is already there.
So we wouldn't have to have someone set up because.
Okay, is there anything set up or anything? There's still somebody on the other end clicking record and sending it to YouTube.
Not only that, the other thing would be we wouldn't have any way to see the other people that are participating in the meeting.
That's what you would be lacking at the middle school.
I think that we, in my opinion, I think we ought to look into hiring a videographer. I think we have other things to be dealing with during a meeting besides having to worry about getting this kind of thing completed. Just my opinion.
Yeah, let me tell you what I'm afraid of. What if they don't show up?
We haven't had that issue in the past.
No, we have not. That was a district employee. But you start putting out 15.
But he was getting I mean, it wasn't, he was doing it as an aside. He wasn't doing it as an employee. You know what I'm saying?
But what I'm saying is you offer $1,500 for a whole year. And we have, as Christy said, million-hour meetings. And this person just finally, no, I'm not going to do this for $30 or something. It ends up being $25 for me to go stay there for 5 or 6 hours. I'm concerned about this videographer. Unless we are prepared to pay a lot more, I don't think you're going to get one.
Well, we had somebody that was willing to do it and, talked it to death and it just never happened. So, I mean, here we are now. Everybody wants to go back to face and we don't have anybody to run the meetings.
But I'm afraid they wanted to do it for 2 meetings a month. I think that's where I'm coming from is I can't imagine someone wanting that small fee for this many hours.
Christy, that was the contention. Just what were you going to get for the $1,500? And I think it was 2 regular meetings. And they said something like 3 hours each or 4 hours, 2 meetings, 4 hours or something like that.
We definitely had discussions about this, that we thought it was just 2 meetings, but we never came to it. So I'm just trying to find a way that we can do it ourselves until we can find someone so that we can go back. I just don't want to put this off anymore. If we could go back to live in person next week, I think we can accomplish more and we have better meetings when we're all face to face. That's just my opinion.
Well, you haven't had a voting meeting to approve this yet, so.
Oh, I know we can't do it. I know we can't do it next week, Mr. Botonic. I was just saying,
Okay.
I would do it if we could. I got the rules of the voting thing down now.
Do we have to do both physical and virtual? Can we not do all physical meetings?
I believe that that's still up to the individual people. If we do all physical meetings, then that means that all the administrators would need to be in the same building at the same time. I don't know that that's good to do right now, but that's why we were leaving some people present physically and some people could still be virtual.
So I had a thought that I haven't really like thought this the whole way through. So this may be the dumbest idea ever in the world, but I'm just going to throw it out there anyway. Could it be possible for those of us who wanted to be live together to just be on the Zoom like we are right now, take our laptops or phones or whatever, iPads, and just be on the Zoom like we are right this very minute, and the people who wanted to stay virtual would be virtual, and we would all still be in this little box?
So
I don't know. Like I said, I'm just like not really thought it through, just throwing it out.
I think the problem there is feedback. Like, so if you were sitting in the same room and I had a computer and Mrs. Smith had a computer, there was too much feedback, because we had that issue in the beginning, even when a couple people were at the school. We had issues with the computers being too close together.
Okay, like I said, I hadn't really thought it through. I was just kind of throwing it out there.
And if your big concern is when you have a videographer, the videographer not showing or not being able to make it for a particular board meeting, then, you know, somebody could, you know, be trained that will be there to step in.
So my question is, the person who we had discussed possibly doing this whenever that was a couple of months ago, is that still an option, or is that not an option?
I can reach out to that individual tomorrow and see if she would be still willing to do that.
Was that a student?
I would need some parameters though to just, you know, if we're talking about 2 meetings a month, at least give that person a fair idea what we're talking about.
Well, I don't think that we're really in a position to make it be anything that's going to cost us any more than whatever's been allotted, which is that $1,500. So I don't think that, you know, if it's, oh, you only are going to do 2 meetings and then else than that it's hourly, like I don't think we're in a position to necessarily do that at the moment. So I don't know. But.
Was that the dollar figure we were talking about? Was that the same offer that was being made to somebody outside of the district? Because this was technically a different position, because the original videographer position I thought was included more things. It wasn't just board meeting, I didn't think. I thought this was like a completely different position.
Which is why I brought up last time that I wouldn't blame anyone for not applying for this position, because it was like chorus, it was anything that would be videoed. You're not going to get anybody to do that for that amount of money. But if you say, hey, we just want you to come to board meetings, I think somebody in our association would take that, especially if we're saying come to 2 board meetings and you get paid hourly after that. I mean, goodness gracious. But we didn't advertise it that way. We advertised it as videoing everything, not just board meetings.
See, on an average of 2 meetings a month, that would be like $50 a meeting.
It's like, I think it comes out to $62.50 a meeting, and if you're figuring they're about 4 hours long, they're making about $15 an hour, which technically isn't horrible if you put it out there as advertising for 2 meetings a month and only board meetings. And then in the interim, if we have 3 meetings that month, one of us is trained to do it so that we could just take care of it on that off chance that there's an extra meeting. I mean, or it's $62.50 or it's $62.50 extra for that person to come to that additional meeting. If that's what we're paying per meeting, if that's what that averages out to, like, why couldn't there be something like that in this proposal? Now, the other problem is, though, this is a stipend in the contract. So yes. How do you get around that? I mean, I don't know.
You stole my thunder.
It has to be posted for 2 weeks.
Would that person also come and set everything up and take everything down? That would have to be stipulated in that. And that's, according to Mr. Pushkar, that's time consuming and
well, if we could vote to, if we have to hire someone, okay, but could someone fill in, or can I be taught how to do it until we get that person? Because if we have to advertise for 2 weeks, we have to wait for somebody to get hired, we're going to be into the end of the school year.
If I can add something just to clarify, that person that video records the board meetings is not the same person that video records the concerts and all that other stuff. That position exists in the contract. I believe it's called stage director. I actually held that position as a teacher. That is separate. Mr. Pollard was also the stage director and happened to record the videos at the same time. So all that person would need to do is attend to the board meetings. They wouldn't have to attend to building level events.
And
So the 1,500 is more amenable when you're not dealing with the prom and graduation and all the other stuff.
so is that how that is worded in the contract, Mr. Krofcheck, that it's just for the board, or is it worded in the contract that it's prom and graduation and?
Anything that occurs in the auditorium is historically, those big events. The musical, even though we outsource the higher end sound now because you have to with the musical. I mean, I did the play, I did the prom, I did graduation. Chris and I shared it, I believe, for a year, and Chris would video. We would both share the sound responsibilities. I believe the contract calls for it as an audio video person, which years ago, before we started recording board meetings, used to be somebody that would get the AV equipment for teachers and that kind of stuff. Specifically, it was a teacher at the high school. I remember he held that position. He passed out at the time VCRs. So that position transformed itself into video recording the board meetings versus the stage and auditorium director.
Vince, how can we vote on something like this tonight?
We
You
can't vote.
can't vote on it tonight.
I'm
We're
sorry,
not voting tonight.
next week. I mean, how can we vote on something next week if we don't know what we're going to do?
Well, I think we vote on this to move it forward so that we can hire someone. I mean, there's no point in hiring someone if we don't know if it's going to pass to go back to in-person. I think we vote on it with the stipulation of moving in that direction to hire someone. Like obviously we're not going to be able to go back if there's no way that we can record it.
That's just we can pass it. We can pass it, but then if you don't have the videographer ever, it's
Right.
It's invalid.
I just
Yeah.
understand why
It's not
they,
implemented. It's not invalid. It's not implemented.
right. I don't understand.
Until you
why
find
things
someone.
Are
This
so
is
difficult.
Mrs. Tarzan, I thought I remembered you reading us the advertisement for this job. Do you remember if it just said board meetings? I can't remember.
No, it was, I believe, even sporting events.
That's what I thought. I thought that's what we
It
advertised
was
for.
a whole lot of other things, I believe.
Right.
So here's a
That's
question.
what I thought you read to us.
So if I can interrupt there, that was based on the fact that we were under stipulations that we couldn't have people come to sporting events. So I remember working with Mr. Masho on a job description that we wanted to tie it into that, but then we essentially ended up getting working with NFHS and getting the huddle and whatnot. And it became, and everybody came out of the woodwork. Westmoreland Sports, Trib Live came out of the woodwork to do that at that particular moment. So yeah, you are correct, Mrs. Smith.
Okay. So if we change it to just board, we have to repost it to the SEA, right?
Yes.
If it's just for board meetings, we can't just offer it to the last person. We would have to repost it for 2 weeks. And then we could advertise it again.
That's the proper process. We have to.
Okay.
post it
Okay. So we know that if we vote next week, we're going to have to repost this to the SEA for 2 weeks. So that takes us into March. and
And
then possibly vote on it at the second meeting in March.
Or,
To possibly be going back live in April. That's what we're saying. Okay.
so I just have one question. Are we able to change the description of that job post, of that stipend, without having an MOU or something with the union to change the description of that stipend?
I could ask, I could work with Mrs. Polakowski tomorrow, or one of the other union officials. I could work with Mr. Kropchak and Mr. Pushkar, and we could try to figure that out.
I would just like to have it be figured out before next Thursday so that we can vote on it and move it forward. At least approve to go back and approve the posting.
I will do that tomorrow.
Okay, and then if we can, because it would have to be posted for 2 weeks, which would put us at, so if we came back and voted to post it on the 18th, it would post on the 19th. And then 2 weeks from that would be the 5th. Is that right, Mrs. Tarson? So that posting would be done on the 5th. Is it possible for us to, Mr. Patonic, to vote on that, to move it forward, to post it? And if we don't get any takers, can we also in that same motion pass to go out of the district? So that maybe we would have some takers before we come back to vote. Because if we have to wait till the 11th to vote to post it outside, then we're not even going to have any candidates by the 18th, is my concern.
That's a good point. Yes, I think you can do that.
Okay. Thank you.
Williams, can I say something?
Sure.
I think the $1,500 stipend is way too low. So if we don't have anybody in the district that's going to do it for $1,500, when they already work here, they know the ins and outs of the building. I don't know how in the world we would get somebody from the outside to come in and do it. Some of these board meetings, I mean, we start at 6. I don't know what they average. It seems like they average 4 to 5 hours. That's 2 board meetings a month. What do we pay them when we have 3 board meetings? I mean, are we going to just average that out and do an hourly fee? I don't know. I don't want to negotiate or say a salary that should be, but maybe, I don't know, Mr. Masha and.
You're not including the time it comes to set up and take down. That could be, they may count that as part of the hours.
Yeah, so somebody who, whenever they talk with the union or something, we've been spinning our wheels with this for forever, it seems. So, this is just going to prolong it. I mean, as a board member, we shouldn't have to be here discussing how the meetings should be videoed or not. It should just be happening. So, maybe we can get that taken care of in a timely manner. That's all.
I will speak also concerning potential salary.
So I'm going to ask a question. Is there anybody on our administrative team that is willing to come to these meetings, at least in the beginning, till we could get somebody hired, that would be willing to set up, take down, hit record, do whatever it is we need to do so that maybe we can run our meetings more effectively in person? We're sitting here and we're taking up a lot of time discussing this, and we do it meeting after meeting. We're making no progress. We're going to be right back here in the same boat that we're in. If we couldn't just get somebody that is willing to do something extra. I know everybody is working hard. We all are, but Dr. Clara.
Yeah, I'll do it until you can find somebody. Somebody can just help me do it the first time, so I got it right. until you guys can find somebody, I would do it.
Thank you.
Wow,
Thank you.
great.
And that's what it's like to be a team player, people. I'm sorry. Moving on. Does anybody else have anything to discuss about this? Okay. All right. So these next two items in old business, Mr. Petonic, that's what you just discussed under solicitor, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Michelle,
Um,
I have a concern. I just want to bring something up about solicitor information. I
Yes.
just think it's important for us to recognize that with our in-house and our out-of-house legal expenses, we're running about $2,000 a week from what I could calculate. And just so everybody's aware that that has become a pretty major issue as part of our budget.
I completely agree with you, Dr. Fike. It's one of those things we need to really be keeping an eye on. Mr. Marnell, do you have any further budget updates, or did we go over everything previously?
I would say we went over everything earlier in the meeting.
Okay. And Mr. Turnley will be with us on March 18th?
That's the plan.
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions in regards to Mr. Turnley or the budget?
If you have any advanced questions for Mr. Turnley, ask you to submit them to myself or Mr. Masha, and we'll forward them to Mr. Turnley. But yes, he plans on attending either in person or Zoom on March 18th.
Okay.
I might have missed this, but will we get the audit report before then so we can prepare questions?
I would assume so, yes. Yes, they are very close to having it finalized, so to speak, bundled up, packaged up. Yes, we're finishing up the footnotes to the financial statements. So it might be done tomorrow, and perhaps published, available for internal review next week.
Okay. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Anything else on budget? Okay, 2021 list of potential graduates.
The board will be asked to consider the list of the 2021 potential graduates.
Is there any discussion? Okay. ESS contract for paraprofessionals.
The board is asked to consider the information provided regarding ESS support staff agreement, which expires at the end of the 2020-2021 school year. And just that, if that's an auto renewal, unless we reach out to them with any potential discussions, further discussions. So that is definitely going to need to be talked about tonight.
When do we have to reach out to them by?
November 5th is the deadline for
March.
I'm sorry, March 5th.
Oh.
Yes, I'm sorry. Wow.
Can someone tell me about that? What are the concerns? Is this good? Is this bad? I don't know. I don't micromanage, so I don't know what this is. Can somebody tell me what the thoughts are on renewing this?
So I have some questions that maybe Mr. Novikov can answer for us. Have we been, I was asking this question every meeting, and then we went to Zoom, and I haven't asked it in quite a while. Have we been fully staffed?
No.
Have we been able to receive substitute paras when we needed them?
No, not consistently.
How are we supporting our low incident classrooms?
We are utilizing the paras that we have, and they've had a lot of movement to bring some paras around, to shift them around, to provide support in different places and spaces. There's about 16, there are 16 of the 19 spots that are filled right now. there are 8 paraprofessionals that were employees of the district that are still employed through ESS. We've had some spots that are consistent, and there hasn't been turnover, and there have been spots that have been inconsistent, and there has been continual turnover and inability to fill positions that for the pandemic, we were never fully staffed either. I think we had a week or two, maybe last year, where we were. Other than that, there was always like one outlying position waiting to be hired. Since the pandemic and returning this year, that's been about our average. It's been about 16 of the 19 vacancies.
And do you have anything else you want to say? And then I'm going to say what my thoughts are.
I feel like more questions may be directed, so I think I could leave that open to be able to answer, because this is tough. I don't want to opine too much and offer like other than just giving facts, right? This has been our process, and it's I don't want to. I'll wait to respond to some direct questions if that's okay with you, Mrs. Williams.
I have a question, Mrs. Williams.
Yes.
Mr. Novikov, whenever, a position can't be filled, what's the excuse that ESS gives our district on why they can't send somebody to our school?
Don't have the staff. Don't have the staff. I mean, it's a perpetual conversation of, well, there are this many people in the pipeline that we're interviewing and hiring and waiting for fingerprints. There's one sub from ESS that we consistently have, and that was a sub who was with us before, who just doesn't really want to work full time, and she just subs and picks up shifts. Other than that, I don't think in the last year we've had any sub outside of that ESS has provided. So my interpretation obviously is that there just aren't any subs that are there, because we don't even have full-time employees that they can bring on adequately enough. So the process for us looking for a full-time employee, and I call frequently, I mean, on my cell phone number, the hiring manager and I communicate frequently, is usually a multi-week process. It's, well, we just onboarded a couple people, they're interviewing. And then what winds up happening, and this is probably getting to what Ms. Williams wanted me to maybe go into. What happens though is ESS is a third-party provider for multiple districts. So these people that are getting onboarded, there's no direct exclusivity to us that they can't choose. So one of the biggest problems we have is that if a paraprofessional is going to be assigned in our district a job that is deemed or felt as being undesirable, ESS has a pool of needs in Hempfield and Greensburg, Salem, and in other districts. And, I do feel that the hiring managers have been, supportive to a degree, obviously, of like not wanting to let people just jump around, but that's the reality. The reality is that this job might be really tough at Southmoreland. And if I'm willing to work at another district, I could probably take a job that's not as challenging. And what we have, and we have amazing paraprofessionals. I love all 16 are incredible. But the reality is the 8 are leftovers. Leftovers are amazing people, but they were our employees that stayed. And most of the other ones we recruited ourselves because we had relationships with them. We have some parents who are now paras with our district. We have relatives of people in our district. There's probably 3 paraprofessionals actively working. I think, 3 that have been like authentically just ESS hires, that have been no pre-relationship, no contact, no special anything that ESS has sent. And there have been a few that ESS has sent that worked for a little bit, and then that they left because when we tried to move a position, they resigned. So that's kind of the reality day to day that we work with.
Mr. Novikov, was your staffing better before we went with this contracted service? When we have,
I think that's common. That's a load. I mean, I think the reality we all know is that, I mean, obviously going ESS is a significant cost saving measure and a big budget issue. Yes, when we still had issues. Paraprofessionals, I worked in 4 school districts. Paraprofessionals and good paraprofessionals are always a challenge because the job nowhere pays what they deserve. That being said, I was an assistant principal before I was a director of special ed. 1 year under the old contract, we did not have turnover like this at all. The positions were staffed and completely filled. And so, yeah, so using that metric, yes, they were certainly, staffing was not as much of an issue. Not to say there weren't any issues, but there were not persistent vacancies.
Well, with this staffing issue, I would suspect that that would cause a great upheaval for the students, not only the students, if someone different's helping them every day or in the classroom, but for the teachers as well, correct?
Yeah, yes. It does create, it creates problems. It creates problems. I mean, it's specific really right now. It's really been specific to some specific areas, I think for good reason. And I just, if people don't understand what these paras do, I don't know if I can just let you know, a paraprofessional to a lot of students, we're talking about students come to our schools that aren't toilet trained, you know, that's part of what we do. So you're talking about some of the most personal things possible, changing a pull-up on a child. We're in the middle of a pandemic, and a lot of our kids who require paraprofessional support, they have mask exemptions because of sensory issues. So our paraprofessionals in the middle of a pandemic have to provide hand-over-hand assistance in going to the bathroom to a child that isn't even able to really wear a mask. And it's that catch-22, this idea that we have to get our low incidence kids in, which we do, but simultaneously the same safety precautions that keep us up at night are almost impossible to do. And it really is something that it takes a special person, and we have a lot of them in our district to do it. I spent my whole career in special education, and I can look at you honestly and say, more than just money, I wouldn't want to change positions with a lot of them. And they do it every day, and they give so much of themselves, and it's cliche maybe to hear it, but it's truly a job that you know, there's a special place in heaven for those paras and individuals for what they do. And I just think sometimes people might not understand that that's the job, that, you know, toileting, changing pull-ups and diapers, snot on you, fluids that might be there. Students may go through aggressive periods. They're going through a med situation. If a student's going through a med change and there's titration issues, we can't just say you can't come to school now. So you may see behaviors that are physical, and that's the reality of that job. And it's, you know, I can't say too much without maybe going and rambling, because I do genuinely have nothing but love and sincere appreciation for paraprofessionals and what they do.
Michelle, I have a question for you. ESS is not free. Okay, it's not free. How much money are we saving as opposed to what we did when we had our employees? Is it a big amount? This is a very specialized population we're talking about. And like I said, they're not free. So how much money are we saving?
Do you know the answer to that, Mr. Marnell? Have you looked at that? I think part of the problem too, Dr. Fike, is, you know, this was a 2-year contract, and it's kind of been interrupted by pandemic. So I don't think we're going to be able to realize like what that savings is. Another concern that I have is the reimbursement. Like, we started billing medical access, which could be bringing money back into the district. But it's my understanding, when we are not staffed consistently with a person to a child, we cannot bill access for that either.
Correct. There are quarterly roles. So Michelle and I have to enter quarterly staffing rosters, because once you're in that system, you're subject to random moment in time studies by the federal government. So you have to be certified on that role, and we have to provide first aid and CPR to bill, and ESS doesn't provide first aid CPR. So we actually provided the training last year for our paras. But if there's a really difficult situation and a student is turning over PCAs, we're not actively billing, because that person's not on our billable role to be able to do that. And that was a huge disruption. You know, we saw our first real return in access was last March, ironically. It was a couple $1,000s, and then everything kind of shut down. And this is supposed to be one of our biggest revenue turners. And that's been a big issue with inconsistency. I don't want to speak though and say I can promise that money will definitely, or this money will be, but it is another layer that creates problems. We do have several paras who are billing, but it's a cumbersome process that they have to do to keep these logs and maintain them.
Okay, but it falls back on us then to pay. It falls back on the school district then,
Yeah,
right?
well, we're paying for it anyways, right? Like it's we're
Reimbursed, right?
yeah, you just won't. Yeah.
So if I looked at stuff correctly, is there about a $4 difference between what the paras actually receive and what we actually pay ESS?
Yes, they receive $12.50 an hour and ESS receives $16.50.
Okay, so I mean, I'm thinking about it from the standpoint of we can't be saving that much money. Even if you think about like add 25% for
the numbers, and Mr. Marnell would be the person to ask, not me. I just know from the numbers when we looked at when this had happened before I was in this role, 183 days at that rate for a pair through ESS is roughly a little over $21,000 if the whole year is worked completely staffed. The number, again, I defer to Mr. Marnell, but I believe the number for a pair with family benefits and insurance and retirement was closer to 38,000 for a year of work. And I don't know if he would even off the top of his head know. Mr. Marnell, I apologize. That's roughly what I remember it being.
No apologies necessary. And we did look at this, Mr. Masha, I, and yourself. And it was a very difficult decision for the administration and for the school board to outsource our aides. And yes, there was a difference in cost, and of course the difference was in state retirement, and of course the benefits cost, the health insurance and dental and vision. And I don't think any of us were either comfortable or happy with that course, but it was a difficult decision for difficult budgetary time. So yes, there was a difference in the cost of employment, and it's sad to look at it that way. At least that's the way I feel, and I'm sure we all feel that way because they're great people. And
I feel like you have to give me some sort of guidance here as to whether or not this contract should be renewed.
Well, I think, okay, if there is a concern, and I think we all understand that, why don't we table it and let Mr. Mash and myself and Mr. Novikov really take another hard look at it if that's what you like, and I don't mind working with as a team with looking at it that way, of course.
Well, the problem is we only have 3 weeks until we have to give them some sort of answer. So, I mean, that's definitely a concern. I had a couple of quick questions. When the paras were employees of the district, were they a member of the teachers union, or are they separate from that?
No, they're not members of the teachers union. No.
Okay.
They are, but Candace, Mrs. Raymond, they do fall under the same, any employee in the district has to also be paid PSERS.
Right. I get that.
Even though they're not part of the contract.
No. I totally get that. Okay. And then the access billing that you were talking about that we kind of want to do, but haven't really had the chance to do. Is that still available to us, even if they are employees of the district, or is that only something we can do if they're third party?
No, we could do that regardless. That either way can be done.
Was that something that was being done when they were employees previously?
No, we initiated it right before the pandemic. The first quarter we initiated it would have been the fall of 2019. Would have been
so in theory, there could be some funds available to kind of reimburse the expense of them in theory.
In theory, but I mean, it's the access world is I mean, other districts pull in the money. They do. So it's a process to be invested in, and we got in it right at the worst time when everything shut down and no billing went on from March to the end of the year. But yes, in theory, our neighboring districts have revenues from that as well.
I mean, because I wasn't on the board when we did this contract, but pretty much everything that I feel like was a concern about doing this has come to fruition. So I don't think it's something that we can just pass off easily. I think it definitely is something we need to look at very carefully.
So if I could, because I told the board I would do this, we brought it up briefly months ago. There are other districts who have relationships with ESS and their own employees as well. So I just think the big concern is not involving me, and it's actually Mr. Patonic and the board to decide whether we just not renew the contract and opt to renegotiate. My belief is, and I'm speculative, but I mean, I knowing what this business is like, ESS isn't going to walk away from us. I don't believe. I don't think that if we were to say we want to consider other options and look at maybe having some of our own and some of theirs, and we decide we can't afford, the board decides that's not going to be able to be something we can do. It's not like ESS goes away. I don't believe. That they're not, still going to be an option there. But I do know there are other districts, for instance, Greensburg, Salem, they're a district that employs a staff of their own paraprofessionals and contracts with ESS for other set positions. And I know Mr. Patonic could probably speak to that, but I guess in this contract, we would have to then have some sort of break in it. And that's, I don't have a law degree, so that's not really for me to opine about, I guess.
Is it possible for us to have, I don't want to say the word committee, but is it possible for a group of us to meet with the special education teachers and get their opinions about this as well, but also for us to meet with the paraprofessionals that we have had in the past and see what they're thinking as to, benefits and all those types of things? I would assume that they would love to be an employee of the district. I'm assuming that, but I think it would be worth us talking to them. I remember last time that when this was going on, of course I wasn't on the board, but I remember hearing from them saying, I wish they would have talked to us specifically because they had ideas of, different things too. So is that possible for us to do?
Certainly. And I hopefully can set any of that up. I think the problem we have now is that if there's not a decision made to take some kind of action before that March 3rd date, we're automatically enrolled in that contract again. So to have that time, I think I'm understanding we'd have to do something. And that's, again, I guess I'll leave that to Mr. Patonic or whoever could answer that question.
It has an auto renewal unless either party decides to terminate 120 days before June 30th. So it has to be 120 days before June 30th.
So you'd be looking at another February meeting if you're not going to decide next week.
So
Because
if we would want to bring back some of our own or all of our own, we could come up with a package. Would it be similar to what we do with the trying to think who's not in a negotiating contract? I don't even know. What's that?
The secretaries are in a similar.
If we had a package that we could offer them similar to how we do with the secretaries, is that something that we could say, this is what we think? Or
So Mr. Patonic, like to get back to the contract portion of this, at the next meeting, we would need to vote to renegotiate our contract with ESS. That's what we would need to do.
No, what you would be doing is you would be simultaneously giving them notice that you were terminating, but offer to renegotiate such that if you never succeeded in coming up with a new agreement, then you're out. But you're out. So then you have to go do something else and be prepared to spend whatever it is extra.
So
if you just say to them, well, we want to negotiate, and you let the deadline go past and you don't like the renegotiations, then it rolls over for another year. If you're okay with that, you're okay. But I mean, that's the risk.
I'm not okay with that, but I guess I guess what I was saying in renegotiating, I'm saying not letting this go to renewal and asking for renegotiation. Like, I'm certainly not going to sit here and say, well, let's renegotiate, but in the meantime, if we don't come to an agreement, we're going to follow through with this. I thought that was kind of so we would have to vote to terminate the contract and request them to renegotiate with us.
Unless you want another February meeting, so you have some more time to have actually done the negotiations. That's the other option, because you've got more.
Do we really need that? Do we not think that we could negotiate this and then come back with a new contract in March or April with them? I mean, why would we have to have a contract by the end of February with them?
Well, it's a different way of doing it to be legally safe to meet the 120 days.
Wait a minute, Michelle, I think we have.
You have, okay, let me try it again. If you vote.
Okay.
Do you want me to speak or not?
Go ahead.
All right, so you have a deadline. If you pass the deadline and haven't given the notice, then it automatically renews. So I don't know what your posture is going into those kinds of negotiations as to what it is you want to do. If, on the other hand, you give them the notice to terminate and then immediately offer to renegotiate, at least you're protected that if you don't like the way the negotiations are going, you've already preserved getting out of it. But right now, the risks that you have are that if you let this continue and you want to hire your own people on the side, under the existing agreement, they get to collect their markup on that. So that's where your problem. I mean, that's another problem. You know, if you even want to have two different labor groups, one who's hired separately and in-house and gets a different pay rate and different benefits, and then these folks don't get those and they're paid less. I'm not sure what's happening in other school districts, but that looks kind of like, it would become an undesirable thing to be an ESS then. So you'd be competing against yourself.
My take on this is very different. Can you say that they have honestly lived up to the terms of their contract with us to this point?
Well, you can terminate it.
No, David. If they have a contract that they are not fulfilling, we have the right to file notice with them stating that we are dissatisfied and that we need to discuss this, and it isn't a matter of termination or not. Look, if they're not
well, that would have been okay, 6 months ago or a year ago or something, but right now you're approaching the termination date.
Yeah,
Also,
we should have known about this a long time ago.
So then my question becomes, other districts are using a model similar to what we're talking about. They have some of their own, they have some that are employed through ESS. And I'm sorry, I definitely see a difference between a low incident child and a child that just needs help getting from point A to point B. I will sit here till the end of time and say that if my child's PCA would have remained with this district, my child would still be in this district. So a PCA under us cost, Mr. Marnell, I think, said $38,000. Is that number correct? Because by sending my child outside of this district, you have cost the district about $20,000, probably more because I'm not even considering transportation. So those are the situations that we need to be more cognizant of. If we have turnover with these kids, ultimately at the end of the day, they're going to leave this district as well. We have to be able to support these kids in the manner in which they deserve to be supported. And I don't think that we can do that through ESS. If every time you have an assignment that is difficult, you're allowed to move from child to child, room to room, it's a disruption for the teacher. It's a disruption to the other staff. It's a disruption to that student. So we have to do something different.
Well, I better understand the problem now that you've articulated it that way, because this is the first I'm hearing all this.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day,
So you need a job description as to what criteria you want for high incidence, or whatever you're going to call, this special category of employee who has more difficult job duties. And essentially what you're saying is, okay, for this class of worker who will only do this kind of work, we want that to be in-house and we want to separate it from you. Okay? Well, okay, so
Yes.
that's your negotiating position. It's quite possible they'd want to do that, but you have to find out.
so Mr. Masha, is that something that you are able to work on in the next couple of days to get an answer from ESS about terminating this contract and renegotiating moving forward?
Yeah, it's my understanding, all we have to do is give them written notice, but I will talk to Mr. Height tomorrow.
Okay.
Michelle, I have a question. We terminate this contract with ESS. We terminate it, okay? And then we decide we want to go back to them. Don't you think they'll jump at the chance?
I think that ESS is in the money-making business.
Right.
This is a business for them. They're not invested in our district. They're in the business to make a profit. And if we would go back to them and say, we're going to hire X amount of our own and we're still going to need 5 or 6 of yours, they're getting $4 extra a person per hour for that. So yes, I will.
The thing I would say, the misnomer maybe is this word negotiation regarding it. I don't know that there's any exclusivity we get doing this. So you're right. I think that literally we're a consumer and they're a supplier. There is not any type of, we are not getting, to my knowledge, a better rate because of this. We are not getting any, we are consumers and they are suppliers. Now that's so that is, if we were to do this, I've been wrong before and I'll be wrong again. So I'll probably end up beating my words, but I don't know that there would be this, they would turn their back away. They're a business who's in the business of supplying paraprofessionals to districts. So unless there's a rate thing and then I'm wrong and I apologize.
No, they'll do it.
Is there, would there be any advantage to us talking with Mr. Lucas to see what types of differences there could be there so that we were categorizing our employees differently than what we would be categorizing those coming from ESS? Because obviously this is special education, that's their specialty. I just want to make sure that we're not putting ourselves in a position to not have proper coverage.
I will work with Mr. Novikov tomorrow.
Thank you. Does anybody else have anything? I did like Mrs. Smith's take on this of speaking with people and trying to decide how best to bring some of our own employees back and where those needs are. I think that's a great idea. I just want to make sure that these kids are covered as they need to be covered, because that's difficult on the teachers as well. If they have call-offs and the teacher now is one-on-one with one child but has 4 other kids in the classroom, that's taking a lot of strain on the teacher as well. So I just want to make sure that we have a better model moving forward, because this one wasn't it. Okay, approval of business manager, transportation director job description.
Michelle, I read this very, very carefully, and I have there are 3 areas that I think are problematic. On page 2, they're not numbered, but the back of page 1 of page 2. The beginning of the second paragraph reads as follows. The essential function of a business manager: abides by, monitors, and enforces staff compliance with federal, state, and local school laws and regulations, mandated programs, district policies, and administrative regulations and applicable collective bargaining agreements with district employees. That surprised me. I'd like an explanation. Now, from that point on, where it goes abides by and so forth, it deals with the financial management of the district. But that says that they are going to enforce staff compliance with federal laws and so forth. I just didn't think that, I don't think that belongs in there. But on page 3 then, about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 paragraphs down, provides a continuous evaluation of support service programs and effectively communicates with staff regarding issues involving the educational program and the furnishing of support services to all levels of the school system. Then the next one says that the business manager performs the duties of the school board secretary in accordance with blah, 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 blah. I just didn't understand those 3 things as an essential function of the business manager.
I think that performs the duties of the school board secretary is an error. That one should have come out, I believe.
No, it's the financial aspects that used to be traditionally done by school board secretaries, 50, 60 years ago, but for
related to financial matters, I'm sorry.
Right, that's the important phrase there.
Okay.
That's
So
the part.
that would still be there.
Wouldn't they be a consultant to the school board secretary? No?
No.
I don't understand those 3 things. They don't seem to relate to the functions of a business manager. Then the other thing that I was concerned about with the transportation thing is on the last page, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 down, establishes and maintains a good rapport with students, teaching staff, and the community, acts as a liaison with parents for complaints and special requests. And I think you should add they're related to transportation concerns. They don't call about the cafeteria food or an educational. I think you should add related to transportation concerns. And then where does it say that they are responsible to go out and check those roads? You know how you do that in the morning, Vince, where you go out and check roads for snow and ice? Is that in there somewhere that I missed it? I didn't see it, but maybe it's in there.
I know that's a big part of Charlie in my job.
I think maybe that communicates with bus drivers, contractors, and school principals regarding transportation changes and assists the central administration in matters dealing with school delays and closings. I mean, we could spell it out and say you have to drive the roads and see if they're okay, but I think that is what that means.
I think you should, though.
Wouldn't it be the
Is
part
that
where
at
informs
the top of the page? Is that it?
informs superintendent of his of road hazards which impact daily transportation?
Mm-hmm.
That
That's what I thought.
No, that's more like a pothole or something, I think.
Oh,
Not regularly having to go out on every snow day and do it. To be safe, I think you should change that.
Hazards are a lot of things, yeah. Okay, I don't care. I just thought it should be specified because it was pointed out to us that that's an important function of the transportation director.
What are we going to put? What roads they're going to drive on in this, or 2 also, or what? How many miles they should
Wouldn't it be
drive that morning?
check roads that are utilized for student transportation? It would be the roads that we use. Not
All of them?
We drive a lot of them.
That's fine. I don't care what you do.
But you do care, you wouldn't have said something. So
I do, Michelle, but maybe I'm reading too much into it. We talked about combining this job. The big issue was, hey, this is a person who's got to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and I wanted it to be more specific. And like I said, if the board doesn't want to change it, is what I don't care about. I mean, whatever you guys want to do, you do. But I just thought the specificity was lacking in terms of that duty, which was described to me as a very important one. And also, they can't be a liaison for parents with complaints and special requests about anything other than transportation concerns. And that thing at the beginning where they mandate and enforce staff compliance with federal school laws, I I didn't see that one either, but
Well, I think those are easy fixes.
Although, doesn't the business manager have some amount of staff himself? So he would be, or that person would be responsible for
well, I did see.
making
it
sure that
specified
applies
in there
as
they
that paragraph
supervise their own
indicated?
staff. Yeah, they supervise their own staff. That's in there.
But I would think that's also what this would mean. And I would also think that, you know, when we're talking about federal programming, I would think that he has something to do with compliance as far as that goes as well, because he's involved there. But I mean, monitors and enforces staff compliance. He has staff that he would be monitoring. I mean,
Educational programs, school laws.
Mr. Masha, could you talk to Mr. Marnell this week maybe and see if that is applicable to him? If it's not, we can take it out.
Yep.
Thanks.
Could it be that it's his staff, his staff's
What
compliance?
happens when you do a copy job from the PSBA? So yes, I think we certainly would talk through this this job description that the PSBA has. I mean, it's all encompassing, and of course, the business managers' roles across the Commonwealth are not all the same. So yes, you certainly, I think, want to make it unique for Southmoreland. What is necessary for Southmoreland, and not what's necessary for Dallas Town School District or Philadelphia or any other school district. So yes, you're right. Some of this is nonsensical, of course, and I agree.
think most of it we went in, except for the things that the Dr. Fike. I think we have to be more specific right now than less.
Sure, absolutely, yes.
Mrs. Smith, I will meet with Mr. Marnell and then I'll reach out to you since you were keynote on this.
Thanks.
And I think as far as road conditions for school bus transportation, I again, this is just me talking. It's up to you folks, and this goes back to my old days at Ligonier Valley and relationship that we had with our contractor there. I think you need to involve your bus contractor here in checking road conditions, because again, it's their school buses and their school vans and minibuses that travel the roads. And I think they should have some input on whether they think the roads are safe for their vehicles to travel upon. It's very difficult to make, to me, it's very difficult to make that decision based on riding around in your own personal vehicle. Things are much different. Trust me, I did it for many years at Ligonier Valley. It's very different when you're riding in a school bus, as opposed to, for example, I drive around in a 4Runner. So yes, I might think something might be safe in a 4Runner, but I wouldn't want to send a school bus on. So I think you should look at involving your bus contractor in helping to make those calls for the winter. And I say that because of legal liability. And I'll leave it at that, but sure, I'll be glad to work with Mr. Masha and the board on any tweaks you want to make on this job description.
does anyone else have anything else about the job description? Okay, these are two funding.
Yeah, the board will be asked to consider formation of an advisory group to assist in the identification of purchases using the new ESSER 2 funds. And I want to thank Mr. Clara for really taking the reins on this. Dan, are you still there?
Yes.
And Dan, Dr. Claire, I have to apologize. I'm so used to calling you Mr. Claire. I should now call you your formal name, Dr. Claire. But I know that Dr. Clara has been working with me to establish some type of template to identify potential needs. And Dr. Claire, would you like to expound on that a little bit?
Yes, very briefly, because I'm sure most of you are hoping that I'll be brief, and typically I'm not, so I'll do my best. The ESSER 2 funding that came in from the state is about $1.4 million. Mr. Marnell alluded to the idea earlier that this would be spent over 2021 through 2023. There are three broad categories we should be considering. The first is safety and mitigation material. The second is academic support. And the third would be technology. And what we should be doing, the process, I think, that makes good sense is for us to start listing all of the things that we think fall into those three umbrellas, and then trying to prioritize and organize them in a way that are most important, and immediate needs would be first, obviously, on our list, and then plan out a timeline for the things that might go as far as 22 and into 23. Because this is a federal grant, and because of the amount of money, we will be soliciting the support of board members, community members, teachers, so that we have some voices to help us to make good decisions on how this money should be best expended. I will include in next meeting some documentation for that. I didn't realize that I might be speaking on it tonight, but I will be better prepared to go over the very clear documentation that we received from PDE on it. But that's just kind of an overview of it to give you a sense of the amount of money, and then the big buckets that we can focus that money in.
Dr. Claire, it is advisable with federal programs and money of that extent that we do have some type of advisory council or group.
That is correct. Yeah. When it's that type of funding amount, it's advisable that you do that. Even when we do Title I, we do parent meetings and things like that, which is not that amount of money. This is significantly more. And I think it's important for us to get the advice and thoughts of many people as we try to make good decisions with it. That's a lot of money for us to use.
Thank you, Dr. Claire.
Certainly.
Does anybody have any questions regarding that? Do we have any other business that anybody on the board would like to speak about before we move into citizens' comments?
Yeah, can I say something real quick? I want to apologize for Mr. Pushkar. I should have mentioned that he has been doing this job of recording, and I know I'm saying that this part is easy, and I'm saying that in that I feel like one of us could do it and he doesn't have to be here doing it, but I did want to thank him because he's been doing this without getting paid for it, which is very admirable. And I apologize if it came off differently, because I do appreciate that he's been doing this for so long. And actually, I didn't really even think about it, but he has been doing it for so long without getting paid. And he's been sitting through all these awful meetings too. So thank you to Mr. Pushkar. I don't even know if he's still on here, but I do appreciate that. I didn't want him to think that that was anything against him at all. And I thank him for doing that.
I appreciate the sentiment. Thank you.
Of course, he's still here. He can't go anywhere till we allow him.
That's right. See, I'm not
Sorry about that.
He's got to end the meeting.
Yeah. Sorry, Mr. Pushkar. Does anybody else have anything?
I would like to say something, Christy, if I may. I'm sorry, Michelle.
Me?
Oh, you've been called worse than that. You've been called worse than that. No, I have received a number of contacts from the public, and a number of people are very, very angry about the decisions that we have made regarding our students, and that's no secret to you. I have very grave concerns, and I learned something today that was very upsetting to me. It was announced today that there were 2 independent research studies. One was done by something called OnePack, and I didn't get the name of the other one. But they verified that the CDC, using the WHO calculation methods, inflated COVID deaths by 92%. They used something called the ICD-10 standards, which is a method of reporting medical statistics, which resulted in the United States death rate. They said that 468,000 people have died, and in reality, it turned out to be 34,000 people out of 320 million. For every COVID death that was reported, they added an additional 14. The scary part was these guidelines were adjusted by the CDC on March 24th, 2020. Their conclusion, this is not mine, their conclusion was that the CDC issued these death reports for political reasons, and their purpose was based on the destruction of the United States economy, all of that. That was just a part of the report. But my concern is looking at what has happened to our children, educationally, socially, psychologically, and in other ways. And I think we've had so many lies and twisted data and statistics fed to us that it really upset me. I really think a lot about what is happening to our children, a lot. What bothered me so much is we take our orders straight from the governor and how our public schools have responded to that. We basically just did whatever they told us on whatever orders they gave us. You know, I'm 80 years old, and I've often learned that those who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it. At the end of World War II, there was a very famous event called the Nuremberg Trials. War criminals were brought to account because they had picked out a specific group, a specific class of people to destroy. Their defense, one and all, was, I was only following orders. I was only following orders. Clearly, I'm a person who does not think like that. But what does this mean for our future decision-making, our children and their welfare? There's a famous book called Ecclesiastes, and its underlying philosophy is an individual can find truth by using their powers of observation and reasoning instead of following blindly. Through this process, you acquire wisdom, and you should focus that wisdom to figure out things on your own. You know, we've all heard the words of anger and frustration by so many members in our community about our educational programs. And I thought about the quote by a famous historian and philosopher, Alexis de Tocqueville. This is what he said. He said, any evil that one endures patiently because it is inevitable becomes unbearable the moment that its elimination becomes probable. Back in March of 2020, everybody was on board. Yeah, we were all going to close down the schools and do this. But a year later, and as time has gone on, we've come to know different truths. And I am personally wrecked by the damage that I have seen happen academically, psychologically, socially. And I've heard that from the people in our community. We have to take a long, hard look at what we've done, why we've done it, and how we've done it. I will never say that I did something wrong because I was just following orders. Thank you. Jan, I think you want to speak.
I have a question, Dr. Fike. You said one PAC. Is that one PAC?
That's what there were two independent organizations. They called it one PAC and another one, and they said it so fast I couldn't write it down. That they were
So
both,
the one PAC, is it one PAC?
I think it's PAK, but I'm not sure.
I'm just curious as to where that, so let me try putting in one PAK and see what comes up. Because when I put in one PAC, I find a link to Super PAC that raised money for Ted Cruz.
No.
If it's one PAC, I think going back to in the world of Google search, one can find anything they want to find to support their side of any argument. And I think that's part of the problem here. So I think many of us sitting on this board are losing sleep of what happens in between our board meetings. We're losing sleep of what's happening in our personal lives, in our work lives. I'm sorry, like when I hear things that it sounds like the rest of us just don't give a crap about what's going on here, and it's just not true. If you could find that information, I'd be happy to read it. But if I can't find that data other than finding something that is a super PAC. I'm sure they're providing studies as well, so.
Michelle, I have repeatedly asked for anybody, anywhere, to contribute research to me showing the value of social distancing. The only way you can do scientific research is to have the blind studies and so forth. There has been none.
So I think that social distancing kind of speaks for itself. When everything is open full and the numbers are going completely wonky and through the roof, and restaurants closed and things closed, the numbers went down. Like, I don't know, I guess maybe those are made up numbers and maybe that's not real in some people's minds, but I do believe there's data out there to support that social distancing has helped this.
I would love to see it. I would love to see it. I think it's a catchphrase that somebody threw out there, everybody jumped on. Yes, it's common sense. There's a common sense thing. But if social distancing was so effective, how can you explain the fact that a family of 5 or 6 living together, only one person gets it? They don't social distance at home. It's a moot point, Michelle. I don't make these things up. I was horrified today when I heard this. The other thing I can tell you, there's a legislator in, I believe it's Michigan, who's actually asked for an investigation because they are being bombarded. They showed the coroner who said that they brought in a person with a gunshot wound. And that person who had tested positive for COVID a month before was written up as a COVID death. And she said that was happening all over the country. And I saw many of those reports, but I didn't pick one individual. This to me is research. And of course, I'm big on research. I really am. But you're going to do what you're going to do. I just think we better think long and hard about blindly accepting what we're being told without any question. Jan wants to make some comments, Michelle.
Thank you. Mr. Kiefer, are you prepared to speak?
Yes, I am. Thank you for calling on me. On the public commenting policy, I didn't get a chance to read it tightly, but there was a line in there about the chairperson blocking public comment or muting. I guess it was muting or disconnecting. I'm not sure which. But I would remind the president, she has broad powers to let that time run and to also let board members interact with the public whenever they're making their public comments. And I'd like to know what the public should expect from you and from the other board members as far as electronic communication during a meeting. Sometimes I feel like with some of the people and some of the connections, the close connections that they have, that we're really not talking to the school board member, we're talking to their wife or their husband or their attorney or their whoever. I think traditionally we had the impression that you're sitting up there giving us your wisdom and your thoughts, and you just demonstrated that you're going to be online pulling up information. I think as a board, I would make a motion that we stop outside electronic communications, including Mr. Petonic. That gives a level playing field. On the heating and ventilation system, the ventilation, I got laughed at asking for that in the spring. But as I drove past the Pepsi school building, I think you call that the primary center, but that building looks like it's pretty old, and I wouldn't assume that its ventilation is as good as the others, but that's the one you chose to start up first. And I suppose you have a study that shows the good places, the bad places in the buildings for ventilation. You should tell the parents that, tell them where the EMF good places and bad places are too. I too would like to ask about the death rates. I drive in through Scottsdale and down Chestnut Street and up Pittsburgh and read the signs on the funeral homes. I don't read the newspaper to find that out. No significant numbers there, and the World Health Organization recently said that the worldwide death from last year to this year, month to month, however you want to compare it, there's no real change at all. So that you take that death statistic out, you take the testing statistic out, and I could deconstruct the other 10 tenets of your COVID philosophy if you would give me an opportunity, but you don't do that. You hide, you keep your nurses, you keep your administrators, you keep your board members away from exposing yourself to public. And this is going to be where the emperor has no clothes. Mr. Masher won't record his meetings with the superintendents where that policy is dictated. You just rubber stamp it, just like we proved with the attestment example. You know, you guys got together, signed that off, and then it's a foregone conclusion you're going to have to play by these rules, which are unsubstantiated. So as in the last, I could talk on public policy and your flaws, but I'm not going to waste my time on that. But whenever I take time to get to the podium, if you would imagine we were in a physical room and I was in a wheelchair, you wouldn't start my 5 minutes when you call on me to get up to the front of the room. I think it just shows the intent, and not only the intent, but the cooperation among the whole staff, the administrative staff. Everyone sits there and watches this public forum be put into something like you would expect in the Gestapo or in behind the Iron Curtain. So, you got to understand that whenever you sit there, and I could just read the names off the screen, and you let what happened to me, someday that's going to happen to you. And when it happens to me, it's happening to everyone in Scottsdale that understands.
30 seconds, Mr. Kiefer.
Just shut up. This public forum has an important role in the community. If we don't get this public forum up and running and get the right minds into this school district, I'm going to call for a referendum to have a municipal oversight on this school board.
Time's up, Mr. Kiefer. Thank you. Does anybody have anything else?
No, wait, don't start that. We just did that.
I move that we adjourn.
Thank you. Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, everybody.